Ray Hess. I was a sergeant in F Company, a mortar sergeant in F Company of the 2nd Platoon. I had 5 men under me.
And you had the 60mm mortar?
Yes, that's correct.
How many tubes did that include?
How many troops?
Tubes. Mortar tubes?
One. Only one. There was one squad in each platoon.
Okay.
And so we had 360mm mortars for the company.
Got it.
Hang on 2 seconds.
So you had one tube, and then you had somebody carrying the base plate?
One fellow to carry the base plate, one to carry the tube and the legs to the mortar, and then ammunition carriers. There was supposed to be 3 ammunition carriers, but the one fellow wasn't with us at the time. So there was only 5 of us.
How many mortars did they carry, those ammunition carriers carry?
They didn't carry mortars, they only carried the ammunition.
Oh, that's what I mean.
We only had one
rounds,
mortar.
The rounds. How many rounds did each guy carry?
Well,
roughly.
I think 6 apiece, 6 rounds apiece. But we never fired them.
Right.
I don't know why. We fired them one time, but I think we could have used them more often, but they weren't used. But the most memorable experience was we were on this hill before 1098, and it had a rock cliff in front of us, which the Germans couldn't get us with artillery, but they could get with mortars. And it was the first time that I recall that we got what they called 10-in-1 rations. There was enough rations in this box to carry 5 men, breakfast, dinner, and supper. You had the K ration for breakfast, the C rations for lunch, and then for supper we had a can of roast beef and a can of string beans. And of course we were allowed to build fires in the afternoon, which we did. And of course the Germans could see the smoke, so they would start firing our mortar rounds. And I had 2 fellows that, if a shell burst within 100 yards of them, they went to their foxholes. I had the 3rd fellow who, it didn't make any difference. He waited until they got a little closer. He was about 50 yards away. And then I had a little redhead fellow from St. Louis here by the name of Jones. He and I stuck around until the last moment, and this one shell was coming in, and I could tell it was going to land awful close to us. I didn't know how far, so I told this redhead, I said, we better get to our foxholes. And I remember diving in my foxhole with a canteen cup of coffee, which I had just made. And of course the shell hit and the dirt flew. And when the stones and the dirt were finished falling, why, I got up and I looked around for the fire, and there had no fire. We had no can of beans. We had no can of roast beef. All we had was canteen cups and canteens left, which had holes in them. And so they were useless. So that was the closest thing I think that I've ever had as far as my experience. Well, I had one other one in the service. That was up in Bergstein, Germany.
Let's go to Bergstein. What happened there?
Bergstein, the last night, it was the last day of our combat. The last night, 2nd Battalion made a patrol down through the side of a ravine to try and get down to the Roar River. And at the beginning of the column, as I understand it, reached the road that was down at the bottom. We were up at the more or less the last ones. And when it comes daylight, we had spent all night in this trail, and it became daylight. So we were told to turn around and start going back. And we got part way back, and then there was I call it a conference. I shouldn't say a conference. We got orders from General Sites, I imagine, that we were to dig in on top of the hill. There was a field there. So we did, and I argued a little bit because all night long there was a machine gunner up in the woods firing over our heads. What he was firing at, I have no idea. And there was one on the other hillside, too, that was firing. But we got up to this open field, and like I say, I put up a little bit of an argument, but not much. I figured, well, I didn't have no map or anything like that there, that they knew what they were doing or talking about. So there's three of us two sergeants, a tech sergeant, a staff sergeant, and myself, and we're deciding where we're going to dig in when this machine gunner, who I think was firing over our heads all night long, appeared at the edge of the woods and started firing. Well, the three of us dropped to the ground and laying on our backs with the weeds falling on our faces and on our bodies. And the third fellow, he says, I'm hit. And, of course, a few nights before that, we were joking around about how we were going to shoot ourselves in the feet, and so we wouldn't have to go into combat again, just joking. And he says, I'm hit. And I says, Joe, this is no time to be joking. And the fellow was laying next to me, Sergeant Ellis, he says, he's not, he's hit. And he says, I'm going to make a dash to go back. I says, you better not, they'll cut you off. They'll cut your legs off. And he says, I'm going. And so he did. And so I moved over and opened this Sergeant Samoska's coat and his tie, or his collar rather, so he could breathe better. And all of a sudden his eyes went up in his forehead, or up in his head, and he wasn't breathing more. Well, I tried to take his pulse, but I couldn't. I was so excited and dumbfounded I couldn't find a pulse. So I put my arm under his head to raise his head a little bit. By that time the machine gunner had stopped firing. And to get that he could breathe better, not knowing where he was hit, and with that, why, his eyes went up and he passed on. Well, and I was out there all by myself as far as I knew, so the machine gun hadn't fired, or the machine gunner hadn't fired for a few minutes, so I figured, well, he must be finished. So I turned around and I run back too. To this day, I wish I'd have gone after him, but I didn't. So that's my two closest experiences.
Going after the machine gunner?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you went back?
Back to where the rest of the troops were.
Right. And that was your last day of combat, right?
Yeah.
What was it feeling like when you finally found out that you were getting pulled out for done?
Relief.
Yeah.
Relief, because, like I say, the battalion at that time, we made that last trip down through that gulch, was about the size of a company. I think we had 13 men in F Company left.
13 out of 130?
Approximately, yes. Of course, we didn't go into Bergstein with 130 men either. I don't know how many men we really had. But that was a scary moment for me, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, it's a close call. Almost didn't make it. Those guys that went down towards the river, they got captured, right?
No, that was another time. This time, everybody come back.
Okay.
That time when they got captured, I think what happened there, F Company was given a 1-inch piece of fluorescent tape, which we put in the back of our helmets. Right. And, of course, the orders were if the fellow in front of you fell or anything happened to him, they fell down a hole, the fellow who was behind him was supposed to catch up with the column in front of him. But I think somebody fell in a hole, and the fellow behind didn't do what he was supposed to do and tried to help the fellow out of the hole, and the column lost contact with one another. As a result, why the guys that were in the front, which was the 1st platoon, they got captured along with Captain Juki, who was our company commander at the time.
Wow. Good story. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you remember? Or?
Not really.
Okay. That was good. Thank you.
You're